What if the 70 holiest men in biblical history, like the absolute saints of the Sinai desert, were actually a corrupt, time-traveling mafia?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds exactly like the pitch for a historical thriller.
Right.
But when you actually look at the raw structural architecture of the ancient texts, that premise becomes less of a fiction and, well, more of a terrifying historical reality.
Which is wild to even think about.
It really is. We are looking at a fundamental misreading of who held power, how they held it, and what they actually wanted.
And that misreading is exactly what we are dismantling today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are so glad you are here with us for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be an intense journey.
It really is, because for thousands of years, the story of Moses going up the mountain has been presented to us as this fixed, unmovable monument.
Exactly. It's practically cinematic at this point.
Right. You have the lightning, the stone tablets, and crucially, those 70 holy elders that Moses supposedly handpicked to stand by his side.
Which is how we've always been taught the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. We have been taught to look at those 70 men and see, the absolute best of the best, the purest followers forming the foundation of a holy council.
It's a very comforting narrative, isn't it? We'd like our historical heroes to have a clear, unquestionable squad of righteous deputies.
We really do. We prefer history to be binary and clean.
But the landscape of these texts is murky. It's heavily layered, and frankly, it's somewhat sinister once you strip away centuries of accumulated folklore.
And that brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are following the formidable research of Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Yes. Dr. Waleed's work here is it's groundbreaking.
It really is an absolute paradigm shift regarding this narrative, and he has done it by applying a strict, uncompromising linguistic and contextual methodology.
Right, and we should emphasize that he relies purely on the Quranic text itself.
Yes, isolating it entirely from external historical assumptions that have colored our perception for millennia.
And what he uncovers there are the hidden layers of what would eventually become known as the Sanhedrin Council.
Which means the stakes here are astronomically high. I mean, we're not just talking about a minor translation error or like a slight disagreement over dates.
No, not at all. The traditional narrative claims that Moses, feeling burdened by the sheer weight of leadership, was instructed to establish this council of 70 elders.
Right. They became the great judicial and religious body.
But Dr. Waleed's research reveals a hidden institutional machine of corruption that actively, systemically battled Moses.
And not just Moses, right?
Exactly. They later battled Jesus and eventually battled Muhammad. It is a completely different story.
Okay, so to understand how this massive historical misinterpretation happened, we have to start with the linguistic key.
We do. We have to deconstruct a single foundational word that birthed this popular myth.
We need to examine the concept of the choice. Because in the traditional narrative, the text is commonly translated to say that Moses chose 70 men from his people for the meeting with God. And, I always pictured Moses walking through the camp, pointing to the most pious, quiet, devout men he could find and saying, you, and you, come with me.
That's the visual we all have.
Yeah.
But the Arabic text of the Quran uses a very specific verb here, ikthara.
Ikhtara.
Right. And Dr. Waleed points out that in Quranic Arabic, this verb does not always mean the subject of the sentence did the act of picking.
Wait, so Moses didn't do the picking?
No. Dr. Waleed's linguistic breakdown shows that iktara is a verb that takes two objects.
Okay.
It carries meanings much closer to stood out, were distinguished, or were elected by their people.
Oh, wow. So the grammatical structure alters the agency of the action completely.
Exactly. Moses did not go through the crowd and point to his 70 favorite friends. It means he took 70 men who had already been chosen by the people.
They were distinguished by the society, not by the prophet.
You've got it.
Okay, let's unpack this for you listening. Imagine you are part of a labor union that is completely fed up and highly suspicious of corporate management.
That's a great analogy.
Right, so a high-stakes meeting is called. The CEO, or in this case, Moses, doesn't get to bring his favorite, most compliant employees to the boardroom to nod along with everything he says.
Because the workers wouldn't stand for it.
Exactly. The workers, who are deeply skeptical, hold a vote. They send their toughest, most cynical, hard-nosed negotiators. They send their guard dogs to keep an eye on things.
And that analogy captures the psychological state of the children of Israel at this exact moment in history perfectly.
They were a highly skeptical public.
Very skeptical. I mean, they had just escaped the trauma of Egypt, they were displaced in the desert, and they were wrestling with profound doubts.
Yeah, they had no interest in letting Moses wander up a mountain alone, only to come back down and dictate terms to them.
Exactly. They demanded their own judicial oversight committee. The society, the Qawm, selected these 70 judges to accompany Moses as their representatives and negotiators.
So Moses was saddled with a delegation he did not pick for their piety. He was basically handed a political establishment.
He was. And Dr. Waleed proves this by showing how the text structurally behaves once they actually get to the mountain.
Narrative logic is so important here.
It is everything. If Moses had handpicked them for being the absolute most faithful men in the entire camp, their behavior at the meeting makes absolutely zero sense.
Right, because what happens when they arrive at the meeting?
These 70 men make a wildly arrogant demand. They declare, "We will not believe you until we see God physically, out in the open."
I mean, it is the ultimate materialistic demand. It's like, show us the money.
Exactly.
We need tangible, physical proof we can touch, or we walk away from the negotiation table.
Right, and ask yourself, would the 70 most spiritually elevated men, handpicked for their pure faith by a prophet, suddenly turn around in the presence of the divine and demand material proof like a bunch of skeptical auditors?
No, obviously not. It defies the internal logic of any spiritual text.
But if you apply Dr. Waleed's linguistic finding that they were elected by a skeptical, worldly public finder, their behavior aligns perfectly.
They arrived at that mountain with a materialistic agenda dictated by their constituents.
Yes, they were executing their political mandate. They were there to secure tangible proof for a society that worshipped tangible things.
That is just, it completely flips the script. By fixing the grammatical understanding of just that one verb, Dr. Waleed transforms the 70 from a council of saints into a council of cynical, entrenched politicians.
It completely changes the power dynamic of the entire Moses narrative. Moses wasn't surrounded by supportive friends.
He was surrounded by an institutional machine that was entirely opposed to his mission.
Exactly. Which brings us to the society that sent them. We need to understand the people Moses was actually dealing with back in the camp.
Right, because the text uses a very harsh word for them. Moses calls them the fools, or the sufaha.
Yes. And just as we deconstructed the word chose, Dr. Waleed's methodology requires us to completely redefine the word fool.
Because in strict Quranic analysis, words do not carry our modern colloquial baggage, right?
Exactly. They have precise structural definitions derived from how they are used across the entire text.
See, when I hear the word fool, my mind instantly goes to someone who makes a terrible financial decision, or like someone acting ridiculous at a party.
Right. It implies a lack of intelligence, a sort of bumbling incompetence.
But Dr. Waleed connects this word to a powerful, calculating religious elite. And on the surface, that feels like a massive contradiction. How can a highly organized political machine be comprised of fools?
The contradiction dissolves when you look at the anatomy of the word within the text's specific ecosystem. Let's look at the scene on the mountain immediately following their demand to see God physically.
Okay.
A violent tremor strikes the 70 men, shaking them to their core.
A warning shake.
Yes. And in the aftermath of this terror, Moses prays to God, saying, "Would you destroy us for what the fools among us did?"
Oh, the fools among us. He creates a deliberate separation there.
Dr. Waleed highlights this critical distinction. Moses separates himself and the 70 men who just experienced the tremor from the fools.
Right, because if the 70 men standing right there were the architects of the foolishness, Moses would have prayed, "Would you destroy us for what we did?"
Or for what these men did. By saying, "For what the fools among us did," he proves the 70 are not the source of the foolishness.
So they are bearing the consequences. They are experiencing the tremor because of the toxic environment created by the fools back in the camp.
Exactly. And the environment back in the camp is pure chaos.
Yeah, I mean, the people have literally built a golden calf to worship.
Right. So the text structurally categorizes the community. The fools were the ones down in the camp who actively constructed and worshipped the golden calf.
And fundamentally, they are the ones who originated the demand for physical proof of God in the first place.
Yes. The 70 men on the mountain were just acting as the political ambassadors of this foolish mindset.
Wow.
And Dr. Waleed shows a brilliant contrast in the text here. The 70 representatives on the mountain were struck by a tremor, which is framed as a severe test or a warning.
But the actual fools who originated the demand, the root of the ideological corruption, what happens to them?
They were struck by a thunderbolt.
A thunderbolt.
That was a definitive punishment.
That is a massive narrative distinction. A tremor is a warning shake, but a thunderbolt is an execution?
Exactly. The 70 are the political symptoms, but the fools are the underlying disease.
Okay, so how does Dr. Waleed define this disease? If a fool isn't just a village idiot, what are they?
Dr. Waleed methodically cross-references every instance of this concept in the text to extract a structural definition. A fool, in this specific Quranic sense, is defined as a systemic institutional failure to estimate God rightly.
It's an ideological disease.
Yes, it is an institutional corruption characterized by very specific documented traits.
And in his research, Dr. Waleed identifies 8 distinct traits that define this elite class of fools.
Let's walk through them because they are fascinating.
Yeah, and for you listening, think about how modern institutions operate as we walk through these 8 traits. The parallels to regulatory capture and institutional monopoly are just staggering. So what is the first trait defining this corrupt elite?
Trait number 1 is altering what is halal lawful and haram unlawful to by a small price.
So basically the institutionalization of bribery.
Exactly. It is the judicial class intentionally manipulating the divine legal code to suit whoever is paying them, or whatever benefits their political survival.
It is the ultimate regulatory capture. I mean, you control the laws, so you twist them to ensure the wealth flows upward. You make the forbidden permissible for a fee.
Precisely. Which leads us to the second trait.
What's that?
Ascribing legislation to themselves, not God. They write the bureaucratic rules, but they claim those rules are divine to force the public into absolute obedience.
Wow. So they insert their own bureaucracy between the people and the divine, and they label their bureaucracy as holy.
Yes, they become the indispensable middlemen.
Like, you can't just be a good person.
Yeah.
You have to fill out their specific paperwork, pay their specific tolls, and obey their specific subclauses.
Because they have convinced the public that their red tape is literally handed down from heaven. It gives them absolute unquestionable authority.
That is terrifyingly effective. Okay, what's the third trait?
Committing polytheism or shirk. But in Dr. Waleed's framework, this isn't necessarily about bowing to a wooden statue of a multi-armed deity.
Right.
It is about taking these scholars, these judges, these council members, and elevating their bureaucratic word to the level of God's word. It is institutional worship.
The public begins to worship the council itself.
Yes.
You value the preservation of the institution over the actual truth it was built to protect. We see this constantly in human history. Institutions become too big to fail, and protecting the reputation of the council becomes more important than justice.
Exactly. And trait 4 is a natural consequence of that, judging by something other than what God revealed.
Meaning they just ignore the foundational revelation altogether.
Right, they judge based on their altered, profitable laws instead.
And then what happens when someone calls them out on it?
That's trait 5, their defense mechanism. Rejecting divine verses. When a prophet or a whistleblower brings a clear truth that contradicts their monopoly, they simply reject it, suppress it, or hide it.
Because the unvarnished truth is terrible for their business model.
Exactly.
If people realized they didn't need this massive, corrupt bureaucracy to connect with the divine, the entire economic engine of the 70 would collapse.
And that economic engine is defined by trait 6, hoarding gold and silver instead of spending it righteously.
Ah, of course. Follow the money.
Always. This religious elite was spectacularly wealthy. If you look at ancient temple economies, they operated almost like central banks.
Right.
The elite were accumulating massive wealth off the backs of the common people through tithes, altered laws, and fines, all while preaching piety.
A classic mega institution operating under the guise of charity while functioning as a wealth extraction machine.
You nailed it. And trait 7 expands the scope, causing corruption on earth.
So it's not just localized to their temples.
No, the text implies this refers to systemic societal rot. When the judicial and religious systems are deeply corrupt, that corruption bleeds into every facet of society. Trade, justice, social care, everything decays.
It's a rot that spreads.
Yes. And finally, trait 8 is the most severe and violent reaction of this institution.
What is?
Shedding blood and killing prophets.
Wow.
When a prophet truly threatened their system, when they couldn't be bought, silenced, or debated into submission, the fools would use violence to eliminate the threat entirely.
When you synthesize all 8 of these traits, the picture Dr. Waleed paints is chilling. The fools are a deeply entrenched, highly organized, immensely wealthy judicial and religious class.
They are a mafia wearing holy robes.
And the 70 men on the mountain were the elected political ambassadors of this exact mafia.
Yes.
So Moses wasn't leading a flock of sheep. He was trying to dismantle a hostile corporate takeover of his own religion.
And this realization is the linchpin for the rest of Dr. Waleed's historical analysis. If we accept this structural reality that the 70 and the fools represent a continuous materialistic judicial class, we can then trace how this exact institution operates across the span of time.
Because they did not disappear when Moses passed away.
No, they didn't.
This brings us to a concept that sounds almost like a science fiction premise, but according to this textual analysis, it is a historical reality. The time-traveling council.
Right.
Because a machine that profitable, that deeply entrenched in the societal DNA doesn't just willingly dissolve, it protects itself. It adapts.
Exactly. The text reveals that this council became a permanently entrenched institutional power. They formalized their authority.
And Dr. Waleed tracks this exact institutional architecture across the timelines of subsequent prophets.
Yes, relying strictly on how the texts structurally identify their traits and behaviors.
Let's fast forward a millennium. We leave the harsh deserts of Moses and enter the stone temples and bustling courtyards of Jesus' era. What do we find sitting right there at the absolute center of power?
We find the exact same institutional machinery.
The exact same one?
In the gospel accounts, which Dr. Waleed cross-references to demonstrate the continuity of this conflict, they are literally called the Council of Elders, or the Sanhedrin.
And the number of members.
The traditional historical number of members comprising the Sanhedrin stems directly from the number 70.
It's just incredible.
It was an elite governing body consisting of chief priests, scribes, and aristocratic judges.
The same 70. I mean, the names of the individuals have changed, their robes might be tailored differently, and the architecture of their buildings has improved, but the function of the institution is identical.
Exactly.
Imagine a massive corporate monopoly that just keeps updating its logo and changing its letterhead over the centuries, but fiercely, violently protects its monopoly on power.
Right. And whenever a whistleblower shows up, they deploy their full institutional weight to crush them.
This structural lens perfectly explains the trial and persecution of Jesus, doesn't it?
Completely. Traditionally, historical narratives frame his conflict with the Sanhedrin as a purely theological dispute. Arguments over interpretations of Scripture.
Right, a religious debate.
But Dr. Waleed's analysis reveals it was fundamentally about power, economics, and institutional survival. Jesus posed an existential threat to the absolute legitimacy of their council-based rule.
Because the Sanhedrin's entire premise was that you had to go through them. You had to follow their altered, hyper-specific laws, you had to pay their temple taxes, and you had to respect their ultimate authority as the gatekeepers of salvation.
They represented the unbroken, continuous rule of the 70.
And Jesus represented the antithesis of that, direct prophetic rule.
Yes, he represented a connection to the divine that completely bypassed their corrupt bureaucracy.
I mean, he was healing people on the Sabbath, directly violating their altered laws.
Right, and he was overturning the tables of the money changers in the temple, which hits directly at their sixth trade hoarding gold and silver.
He was publicly dismantling their entire operation and exposing the structural rot.
Exactly. He was a walking liability to a 1,000-year-old business model.
He didn't just argue with them. According to the text, he actively engaged in structural warfare to replace them.
Yes, and the text provides a fascinating detail that Dr. Waleed highlights here. Jesus countered this corrupt council by sending out his own delegation to preach and heal.
And how many disciples did he choose for this specific mission?
Exactly 70. He sent out 70 new disciples.
He literally mirrored their structural number to overwrite their authority.
Yes, he did.
He was communicating in a language the public would understand. He was essentially saying, you have your corrupt 70 who hoard wealth, hide the truth, and alter the laws, while I am sending out a new 70 who will spread the truth, heal the sick for free, and restore the original mandate.
It is a direct institutional counteroffensive. He was overriding their corrupt authority with a purified version.
That's just brilliant.
And Dr. Waleed connects this to a broader narrative arc by looking at the Quranic story of Zechariah and Mary, which predates Jesus' ministry, but sets the stage for it.
Oh, right. Let's talk about Zechariah.
Zechariah was a righteous prophet serving in the sanctuary, and he was terrified of this exact council.
The Quran refers to them as the Mawali, right?
Yes. the inheritors, or the entrenched council waiting to seize total control.
So Zechariah is looking around the temple, observing these corrupt judges, seeing the bribery and the hoarding of wealth, and realizing the moment I die, these guys are going to take complete, unchecked control of the sanctuary. The disease will be terminal.
That was his exact fear. He feared the Mawali would completely corrupt the religion, turning it entirely into a mechanism for wealth extraction.
So what does he do?
He prays desperately for an heir to continue the prophetic resistance. God grants him John Yahya. And later, Mary brings the infant Jesus to Jerusalem specifically to challenge this exact council.
Wow.
When viewed through Dr. Waleed's methodology, the entire narrative arc of that era is a concentrated, multi-generational divine effort to break the monopoly of this specific historical council of 70.
The narrative cohesion there is incredible. It pulls these isolated Sunday school stories into a massive, unified geopolitical and spiritual thriller.
It really does.
But the council, this mindset of the fools, survives Jesus too, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes.
They orchestrate his trial, they maintain their grip on the institutions, and they keep traveling through time.
Which brings us to the era of the Prophet Muhammad, and one of the most fascinating textual mysteries Dr. Waleed solves.
Yes, and Dr. Waleed's strict linguistic contextual methodology shines here because it addresses a verse that has puzzled commentators for centuries.
Okay, set the scene for us.
In the Quran, when God is addressing Muhammad regarding the hypocrites and the polytheists who are fiercely, violently opposing his message, a very specific metric is used.
The verse states, even if you ask forgiveness for them 70 times, God will not forgive them.
Exactly, 70 times.
Now, if you read traditional commentaries, this is almost universally explained away as an ancient idiom, similar to how we might say, I've told you 1,000,000 times. It isn't meant to be literal. It is just a placeholder for a very large amount.
That is the traditional, somewhat dismissive explanation. But Dr. Waleed argues that in a text as structurally precise and internally consistent as the Quran, this is not just a random exaggeration.
It's too specific.
Right. It is a highly specific structural callback to the exact same corrupt Council of 70.
Okay, let's unpack the implications of that carefully, because we are obviously not saying these are the literal, biological same men who stood on the mountain with Moses or sat in the Sanhedrin.
No, they'd be centuries old.
Right, we are talking about the exact same institutional mindset, correct?
It is the exact same institutional machinery, operated by the ideological descendants of that same elite class, running the exact same playbook.
Wow.
Dr. Waleed demonstrates that the elite opponents of Muhammad described in these passages shared the exact same 8 traits as the fools of Moses' time and the Sanhedrin of Jesus' time. The behavioral fingerprint is identical.
Okay, let's test that fingerprint against the traits we discussed earlier. Did this new elite class mock the revelations?
Yes, they constantly demanded angels or massive physical miracles.
Mirroring the men at the mountain demanding to see God physically.
Exact.
Did they alter laws?
Yes, they had complex, self-serving systems of what was permissible in trade and pilgrimage to maintain their social hierarchy.
And did they hoard wealth?
Absolutely. The elite opponents of Muhammad were vastly wealthy merchant lords who despised his message of economic equity and social justice.
So they demanded everything on their own materialistic terms.
They were a deeply entrenched elite fighting a desperate war to maintain their monopoly on spiritual and economic authority.
And the text uses a very potent word to categorize this group opposing Muhammad. It describes them as najas, which translates to impure.
Yes, but we need to be incredibly precise here, because words like impure carry heavy, often dangerous baggage in English translations.
Right. Dr. Waleed stresses that najas here does not mean physically dirty.
No, it has nothing to do with hygiene or physical untouchability. It is an ideological impurity.
It is the impurity of shirk, of valuing money, power, and human bureaucracy over the divine.
Yes, it is the impurity of being a fool who systemically fails to estimate God rightly.
That is a vital distinction. It is a structural impurity. Their entire operating system is corrupt, making them incompatible with the concept of a pure sanctuary.
Exactly. And this brings us to a profound symmetrical realization in Dr. Waleed's findings.
Let's hear it.
Think back to the very beginning of our timeline, Moses on the mountain. After the tremor struck the 70 representatives, Moses prayed for them.
Right, it was a conditional prayer.
Yes. He was essentially asking for mercy, attempting to separate those among the 70 who might repent from the truly hardened fools back in the camp.
Moses was basically engaged in damage control. He said, "Would you destroy us for what the fools among us did?" He was trying to salvage the situation and offer them a path back.
But centuries later, when dealing with Muhammad's opponents, the ideological successors of those same original fools, the textual command shifts dramatically.
The phrase 70 times signifies the absolute end of the line for this corrupt institution.
Exactly. The text is effectively saying, even if you try to apply the mercy Moses asked the original 70, it will not work here.
They have doubled down on their corruption across millennia.
They have killed prophets, they have altered the scriptures, they have hoarded the wealth of nations, and they have caused systemic corruption on earth.
This cycle of mercy for this specific institutional mindset is ending.
No forgiveness is possible because the corruption is absolute.
The number 70 isn't just a number, it is a historical fingerprint.
It's the text saying, we know exactly who you are, we know what you did to Moses, we know what you did to Jesus, and this multi-generational war ends now.
The symmetry is devastating.
It really is.
But this leads us to what might be the most explosive, reality-bending part of Dr. Waleed's research.
Oh, yes.
If this corrupt council existed across all these eras, fighting a continuous war against a succession of prophets, where is the battlefield? Where did these conflicts actually take place?
This is the paradigm shift that forces us to reevaluate everything.
Because if you follow the traditional historical and geographical narratives, these events are scattered across massive distances in the Middle East.
Right. Moses is down in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Jesus is up in Jerusalem and the Galilee. Muhammad is deep in the Hijaz region in Mecca and Medina.
The theater of this holy war keeps moving hundreds of miles at a time. It feels like a traveling roadshow of prophecy. Different cities, different climates, different geopolitical realities.
But Dr. Waleed, relying strictly on the geographical markers contained within the Quran itself, ignoring the maps drawn by external historians centuries later, completely redraws the map of this conflict.
He argues that the traditional map is a product of assumed history, not the structural evidence of the text.
Exactly.
I remember reading this section of his work and having to pause because it shifts the entire axis of the historical world. Walk us through Dr. Waleed's map.
Let's start with the anchor point, Baka. The Quran mentions Baka as the first house placed for humanity.
So where does Dr. Waleed place Baka?
Through rigorous contextual linking of the verses, tracking how the text describes the sanctuary and its surroundings, Dr. Waleed equates Baka directly with Jerusalem al-Quds and the sacred mosque al-Masjid al-Haram.
Okay, stop right there, because for the vast majority of you listening, Baka, the first house, the sacred mosque, that is Mecca and the Hijaz.
Right.
But Dr. Waleed is saying the text points to Jerusalem.
According to his pure textual analysis, yes. The spiritual and geographical center of gravity in the text is Jerusalem.
What?
And the remapping doesn't stop there. He locates Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque, not as a separate building situated within Jerusalem as it is traditionally understood today, but at the far edge of the Dead Sea region.
An area referred to in the text as Al-Yam or Wadi Tuwa.
Exactly.
Okay, I need to pump the brakes here because my brain is trying to reconcile thousands of years of accepted geography with this new structural map.
It's a lot to take in.
How does he prove this using just the text? I mean, how do you move entire historical epics from one region to another based on grammar and syntax?
You look at the descriptions of the landscapes, the water sources, and specifically, the language used to describe the major battles.
Okay, give us an example.
Let's look at the story of Moses. The text describes a pivotal moment, the meeting of the two hosts, Tara al-Jaman, during the time of Moses, when he was facing the forces of Pharaoh.
Right.
Dr. Waleed's mapping, based on the textual descriptions of the terrain and the sea, places this event west of the Dead Sea. Now, fast forward to the era of Muhammad. The text describes the Battle of Badr, a defining existential clash with his own generation of fools.
In what language does the text use?
It uses incredibly similar, highly specific language. The day the two hosts met, Yom Iltaka al-Jaman.
Oh, wow.
And Dr. Waleed meticulously maps the geographical markers of this battle to the exact same region west of the Dead Sea.
Think about the implications of that. Dr. Waleed is essentially saying that the theater of the spiritual war didn't jump around randomly across thousands of miles.
No, it didn't.
The stage was fixed. The prophets were not wandering blindly. They were continually returning to the same blessed land, the same specific geographical arena, to reclaim it from the exact same corrupt institution.
Yes. Dr. Waleed calls this the constant space changing time theory.
I love that. Constant space, changing time.
The geography remains fixed, centered tightly around Baka, Jerusalem, and the Dead Sea region.
And the enemy remains fixed. The 70 fools, this deeply entrenched, corrupt, religious and political elite that hoards wealth and alters laws.
Exactly. The only variable is time. And the prophets who were dispatched, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad.
They are sent to the same contested theater across the millennia to continuously purge the sanctuary of this materialistic corruption.
It makes the narrative so incredibly tight. It is no longer a sprawling, disconnected anthology of desert stories.
No, it is a focused, multi-generational epic that takes place in a single, highly contested capital city.
Yes, and if you accept this geographical shift, it subtly explains one of the most famous, yet heavily debated, events in Muhammad's life.
The change of the Qibla, the direction of prayer.
Exactly. It provides the ultimate context for that event.
Because the text explicitly tells us that the fools, these same elite opponents we have been tracking, were the ones who fiercely questioned and resisted Muhammad's change of the Qibla.
Right. Why would they care so deeply about which direction he prayed?
Because, as Dr. Waleed argues, it was a massive geopolitical and economic rejection of their authority.
Yes. Muhammad ultimately abandoned the fools in their old corrupted center of power, which Dr. Waleed identifies in this framework as Mecca Petra, and physically and spiritually turned his face and the face of his entire movement toward the true original blessed land of Bakka, Jerusalem.
He turned his back on their corrupted institution, rejected their altered laws, and faced the original sanctuary. He was declaring independence from the Council of 70.
Exactly. And by doing this, he wasn't doing something unprecedented or strange. He was executing the exact same structural maneuver his predecessors did.
He was doing exactly as Abraham had done centuries before, when Abraham broke the literal and metaphorical idols of his own generation of fools to establish pure worship.
It forms a perfect, unbreakable structural loop. The prophets are engaged in a continuous, grueling effort to sever the influence of this corrupt, wealth-hoarding, law-altering elite from the sacred spaces of humanity.
The conflict is singular.
The enemy is singular.
And according to Dr. Waleed's meticulous map, the location is singular.
It really is.
I am processing the sheer scale of what Dr. Waleed has uncovered. It is phenomenal how changing the lens, putting aside the external historical baggage, the centuries of commentary, the assumed maps, and just looking at the structural architecture of the text itself, completely rewrites a story we all thought we knew by heart.
It serves as a profound demonstration of the danger of reading ancient texts through the lens of assumed history. When we force our external maps and our comforting binaries onto the text, we blind ourselves to the actual story being told. Dr. Waleed's methodology forces us to let the text define its own terms, its own geography, and its own villains.
We have been on an incredible journey today through Dr. Khaled Waleed's formidable research.
A lot to unpack.
It is, but it's so worth it. We started with a single misunderstood word, iktara, chose.
Right.
By realizing that Moses didn't handpick a squad of holy men, but was rather saddled with a cynical oversight committee elected by a skeptical public, we pulled a thread that unraveled a massive, unified theory of history.
We learned that the 70 were never the heroes of the story.
No, they were the political face of the fools, an elite, materialistic, deeply corrupt judicial class defined by 8 specific traits of institutional rot.
From hoarding wealth and altering divine laws for profit, to ascribing their own bureaucracy to God and shedding the blood of whistleblowers.
We tracked this mafia, this time-traveling council, as it maintained its iron grip on power across the centuries. We saw them in the time of Jesus, operating as the Sanhedrin, putting him on trial not for theology, but to protect their monopoly.
And we saw Jesus launch a structural counteroffensive by sending out his own 70 disciples to overwrite them.
We saw this exact same institutional mindset clash with Muhammad, possessing the exact same traits, leading to the ultimate textual condemnation from God.
Even if you ask forgiveness for them 70 times, God will not forgive them. The cycle of mercy for the corrupt elite was terminated.
And finally, we saw how Dr. Waleed's strict textual methodology redraws the map of the ancient world, placing this entire millennia-long war against corruption in a single constant theater centered around Bakka, Jerusalem, and the Dead Sea.
A fixed stage, a fixed enemy, and a succession of prophets fighting relentlessly to reclaim the sanctuary for humanity.
It is a breathtaking reframing of history. It brings us back to that marble statue we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Yes, the traditional story of the 70 holy men is a comforting statue. It is clean, it is neat, it makes us feel good about the past.
But Dr. Waleed has shown us that if you look closely at the text, the marble crumbles. What is revealed underneath is a machine a human machine of political and religious corruption that is far more complex, far darker, and frankly, far more relevant to how the world actually works.
And that modern relevance is exactly what I want to leave you with today. Dr. Waleed showed us how this Council of 70 weaponized religion, altered laws, and hoarded wealth to maintain their absolute monopoly on power across thousands of years.
Yeah.
They demanded material proof, they violently rejected anything that threatened their status, and they successfully presented themselves as the only legitimate gatekeepers to the truth.
The ultimate untouchable middlemen.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, if you look at the modern world, with our massive, opaque institutions, our societal obsession with materialistic proofs, and the way the powerful continually alter the regulatory rules to buy a small price and maintain their monopolies.
Where is the Council of 70 sitting today? And who are the fools?
Exactly.
A profound question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the groundbreaking work of Dr. Khaled Waleed. Until next time, keep questioning the statues and keep looking for the machinery underneath.